fine. So since we have not been together for a couple of weeks, it might be useful just to look back and see. This is a new slide set. This is another sort of a variation. There's no fundamentally new content. But this starts with this kind of, I like, provocative statement. What if a human-generated force field determined your success? And I think that statement by itself says it all. It's interesting to reflect on this because I think it's absolutely right. And I go on to talk about the way I first got onto this was reading a book called The Challenger Launch Decision. I don't remember what put me onto this book, but one of my sort of jokes is when you work as a professor, every lunch meeting ends up with a book recommendation. So somebody probably recommended this book. I don't remember that specifically, but it was a mind blower for me because I thought I understood what happened to Challenger. And this is written by Diane Vaughn, and she says two things that got my attention. Two sentences said everything. Why did they proceed to launch when all the data suggested otherwise? The assumption that I had made was that they did not have data for these extreme temperatures. And in fact, they did. And the second thing that really was kind of life-changing for me, frankly, it is unfortunate that the sociological explanation is the correct one, as these invisible and unacknowledged forces elude remedy. Wow. So there's a force that is invisible and unacknowledged is driving everything, including, I guess, the worst space disaster in history, and changed international space for years. And then on to more about this and the fact that I think the defining feature of our species, one of them is our hypertribalism. And this gave us the advantage evolutionary to, for example, succeed the Neanderthals, and probably going to prove to be the cause of our demise. And then social context fields, comparing them with, I like to do this, make analogies to basic science, to fields that you're all familiar with, gravitational fields and electromagnetic fields and how things interact with them. And then what drives this thing, and there's number one is the leader's behaviors, and the leader is usually the hierarchical leader, but not necessarily. But I think the force that sets in is the team members' behavioral norms. And a consequence of our tribalism is that we adopt beliefs that we think that are our own. We actually think we thought them up when they're not. They're from the group. And you can see this in the Congress, the political parties. And it's more about what happened to Challenger and the things that set it up. And I think the basic setup was the fact that NASA sold the space shuttle on a lie. But the people believed, the group believed, it was cheap access to space when the data said it wasn't. And the only way to make it cheap was to launch faster. And the pressure to do that was immense because the people, I believe, thought the future of the agency was in peril. That was the root cause. And then Hubble, which I know a lot about, what happened here was a flawed instrument was used to fine-tune the mirror. And the incredible thing was that there was technical data that said that the mirror was flawed. And the engineers at PerkinElmer, using as an effect of confirmation bias, rationalized it away. Again, the group thing. And then even the Korean Airlines crashing at 17 times normal rates, and these are crashing 747s. This is big jets. And it went on for 4 years. Why did it go on for 4 years? Because they had not considered a social force as the problem. They kept testing the pilots in simulators, and they did passably well until someone noticed what the root cause was, and inappropriate deference to the leader, the captain. Then even the Tenerife airport disaster, where the most senior captain in KLM was piloting the plane, had a garbled communication. plane was fueled. He wanted to get home. I think it was his daughter's wedding or something. He wanted to get home. He spooled up for takeoff, and the second officer said, "I didn't hear a takeoff clearance." And the guy kind of glared at him, and under that pressure of this superior, he's the guy on all the posters for KLM. He's their number one, Jacob Van Zanten. The second time, he didn't say anything, and they ran into a parked airplane on the runway. And then the Tokyo train crash, the same thing. To avoid punishment, the guy violated the speed limits grossly, derailed the train. Even the Fukushima Daiichi, which was at first blamed on a natural event, the tsunami, first the earthquake, then the tsunami. And in fact, the failure review board that was put together by University of Tokyo said, no, it was man-made. They knew they had a problem. Management said, don't worry, so they didn't. Then for a more recent example, the MAX, which is just really a almost unthinkably crazy story, and came out of a need to protect orders and a bunch of lies again that management promulgated, and a stupid technical decision. And in every case, the common theme is that nobody knew about this invisible force. They didn't look at it. And so summarizing that, and then things you can do with this system, I thought it's useful to sort of put this into the space of regular humans. And then a sort of overview of the processes, the book, the online tools, the workshops, Amber process, context shifting worksheet process. Then the idea of simplifying something with which is how physics works. The equations of physics actually analyze, which is a fancy word for simplify. And I use the example of prism simplifying light, and this coordinate system to simplify social context. That's where we wound up last time. So comments, questions? I think we finished on this chart, which is kind of a core chart. This is probably the fundamental basis of everything. I call it the F equals ma, Newton's second law of social matters, to be able to dissect this into 4 pieces that you can manage with specific behaviors.
Great summary. Thank you. Ready for the next steps.
Okay, Nat, any thoughts, comments? Nico?
No, none right now.
Okay.
I'm good.
So I call this a social context field. What is a field? And anybody that does technical training would know what a field is. And that's not it. That's not a field. That's a field for a farmer, not for a physicist or engineer. A field is something, I like this definition. Sean Carroll's a theoretical physicist, a really interesting guy. A field is something that fills a space taking on a value everywhere. So if you think about that, it's kind of an imaginary thing. I mean, it's something that fills a space. You can see it's a mathematical notion, the idea of a field. It's not physically. So it's a mathematical abstraction that we use to understand what Einstein called action at a distance. And I think even to this day, we say we understand gravity and electromagnetism in terms of fields, but a mathematical abstraction is to a physicist's understanding, but it's not really understanding. Fields were not popular, particularly. There was forces before that, till Einstein came along and made the idea of curvature of space-time is how gravity works. That made fields popular. Maybe in sometime in the future, they'll go out of vogue for something else. And we measure fields with instruments. We sort of pretend it's reality. And we have a magnetometer, for example, measure a magnetic field. Human behaviors create social context fields. We measure those by assessing behaviors against standards. So those fields are as real as physical fields, which means they're imaginary notions.
I like that last sentence. That's like one of the most, I don't know if I missed it before the other couple of times we've been through this, but yeah, the standards is I think a really important concept, at least for me.
Yeah, so, yeah, that's fun. So early on, I was building this measurement tool, and I was doing a workshop at Marshall Space Flight Center. And I was musing to the group about how to measure behaviors and get some accuracy in a context of normalization of deviance. In other words, how do you get people to make a quantitative assessment of a behavior if your perception is skewed and things that are nonsensical or useless don't seem that way, like the classic case being the Challenger story, where I got the expression. So someone in the class raised their hand and said, I know how you do it. And I didn't know how I did it, but I played along and said, how do I do it? He said, you measure against a standard. And I thought, that's brilliant. So the idea of using a standard to mitigate normalization of deviance or all the other things that obscure perception, confirmation bias, inattentional blindness run through the list. Yeah, so the idea of a standard, I think, is a really, thank you, Nat, for pointing that out. But that's how it came about. Once the guy said it, I got it immediately. But until he did, I didn't know to do this. So how things happen. So Mother Nature has 4 fields, the gravity field. And it's interesting in that it's a very, very weak field. In fact, right now I am opposing the force of the entire Earth with my little mammal body. That's how weak it is, but it has infinite range as far as we know. And so this permeates the universe as best we can tell. And just some sense of the universe, that this is a Hubble deep field measurement. Every dot is a galaxy. And from the first measurement, we were able to up the estimate of number of galaxies by a factor of 10. There's 2 trillion in the observable universe, and each one with 100 billion stars. That fact just gives me goosebumps. Electromagnetic field is much, much stronger, but has limited range. And it's what gives matter substance. When I push on this desk and it's hard, it's electromagnetic imbalances that create that. If these fields had the range of gravity, everything would be exploding. The weak field, which is very, very weak and very limited range, it's involved with radioactive decay. I don't think of interest to anybody except physicists. And the strong field, which is, we're talking like compared to gravity, maybe 25 orders of magnitude. We're talking vast differences in strength and very short range, and it's the source of nuclear energy. So the fields made by humans, the social context field generated by human behaviors, sustained by human interactions, words, and actions. So I think action is actually more than anything, but every time humans interact, we create this field. Every time we're on this call together, we're creating a social context field of hopefully learning and exchange of information. And then it depends on what we do, how we behave. It's focused by leaders, again, hierarchical, technical, and some people by personality have great power. We promulgate it through the tribe with shared storylines. It's called homophily. And I think I'm always interested in what's underlying all of this. And I think the underlying power of this comes from our needs for respect, appreciation, and inclusion. These are deep human needs. And this is why I prefer to work at the team level. I don't think working with an individual, other than helping them learn to teach this or working closely with you guys and calling each other out on our behaviors, it's not effective as changing the whole group. So this is why team-centric work, I think, is so important. And I went to many so-called leadership training courses when I was at NASA, and these were, NASA could attract and hire the most expensive and best consultants in the world. People like to work with the agency. It has a great mission and nothing secret. But when I went back to work, and the reality was none of it took. Why? Because the social context back in the office was not the one in the classroom. So a team level, I think, is really important. And in that sense, we're all a little team. So how we behave towards each other is important. Thoughts, questions, comments? This is a profound idea here, I think, this team.
Yep. Yeah, I think how to affect change effectively
Yep.
So we're waiting like.
is what we all want to do. That's why we're all here.
Yep.
And so, yeah, understanding the scale at which you can move behavior is powerful.
And so it's everybody you interact with. It's you and your family members and Tanya. It's how you behave toward them. And so I love this expression from Gandhi. We must be the change we want to see in the world. So it's all about you changing you. And if you change your behaviors, you will affect those everybody around you. If you make a habit of not showing up or coming late, other people do the same thing. These are really, to me, profound ideas. So
Yeah, for me, very meaningful.
what are the social context fields of the behaviors? Well, the four I called dimensions are the green, cultivating, which is also derived from personality types. It's about caring for and about people and deep, noble values. I was reading an article that I think I put in a newsletter about what's happening in Israel and so forth. And the whole point was, what are the moral values at play here? That's the issue. And when you talk about, say, Donald Trump, he has no, as I can see, no morality. And that's the issue. The including about relationships, it's in the space of what's sensed and what's felt, and how do we relate to people. And these two things address our two deepest needs. I was initially surprised to find that our two deepest needs were emotional. That did not occur to me till I did this work. So this is really foundational to everything. Visioning, caring about innovation and ideas, directing, caring about process and consistency. So these are really sort of four, as I think of these as four facets of a gemstone we're looking into. At the center, it's I think the word that sums it all up is your character. So these are four elements of character. And I think you need all four. Even in a given day, I think you need all four. So this is another kind of foundational idea here. Comments, questions? So the behaviors, Go ahead.
I was just going to say, this is really helpful. I think you continue to tweak these slides, and they're getting, I don't know if better is the right term, but I'm accessing them more effectively.
Well, partially,
So thank you.
Feedback from you guys that's doing this. There's an expression in training called chunk it down. And that's what we're doing, chunking it down into bite-sized pieces. So the behaviors we identify, expressing authentic appreciation. The statement is living in gratitude. I appreciate you for. It's really that simple. And and then the second behavior is addressing shared interest. Act on what do they want that I can want for them also. The most interesting thing about this behavior that didn't occur to me till I worked with it a while is that when you address a shared interest, when you act on what the other person wants, you're getting your own needs met as well. It's kind of a feedback loop that's there. Thoughts about these two behaviors, anybody? Okay. An including dimension, appropriate inclusion.
Yeah, Charlie, I just came under the impression of how much more of the American culture making of appreciation than the South African culture. It's constantly aware of it and always thinking about this.
You know,
So
I hear that.
For me, it's so clear, it's in my face.
I hear that comment a lot, and I don't buy it. I think these are human needs for everybody. One of my most fun examples, I did a workshop in Germany some years ago, and the guy came up to me after, "Oh, really, that was the best thing I've ever heard. Just really appreciate you. Thank you so much for coming here and doing this. It's been marvelous to hear this wisdom from you, and I'm just so appreciative." But you have to know, in Germany, we don't appreciate. So in the middle, I said, "Do you hear what you're doing?" So I hear the same comment in every country, and I don't think it's true. I think it's deep human need. And I think believing that limits you. That's my point, I guess. I would
It's a human need,
chuck that
but
storyline that we don't do
uh,
it in South
the,
Africa.
yeah, but it is so clear to me. You don't get the kind of expressions even and showing of gratitude or appreciation like I've experienced in the American culture. It is for me definitely not even a question. It's you may say it's got different ways of expressing itself because there's not a lack of gratitude and appreciation, but it's much less.
I'm just saying
It's so much less visible or that you hear.
that's not a useful storyline. Let it go. That's all I'm saying. Don't run it. It's not useful.
Mm.
I'm now subscribed to a South African newspaper, and I'll send you examples of appreciation as I see them in there. And I don't think they're common in U.S. newspapers, but I'll look in South African newspaper. Inclusion, another deep human need. We need to feel like we're members of the tribe and accepted, whether it's family, business, work team, you name it. So welcoming other people as members of the team is important. And then your integrity. What I like about these four things is that they're totally up to you. No one can take them away. They're your personal treasures. They're optional. You can cast them aside with sloppiness, or you can keep your integrity. You know that I'll do what I said or renegotiate before breaking. This is big. Address unfortunate realities. I just like to think how different the world would be if, for example, politicians and the people who support them could do this. Have the courage to face the truth and respond to it. There's so much denial. 100% committed. This is a state of focus, and I've not talked much about this until this slide set, but I've gotten old enough. I don't care, so I got a little more open. The little storyline that's powered me came from Davy Crockett when I was about 10 years old. Be sure you're right, then go ahead. So I asked myself that question, and then act gives you the power to act. It's focusing. No tolerance for drama. And again, really simple strategies. You find yourself complaining, turn it into a request or forget about it. You find yourself blaming on your role. This latter piece about the blamer, it just really fascinates me. And when I was in China, they're very skeptical people. I like that in them. They're very questioning everything. So they asked me to do context shifting worksheet work with people in real time. So I'd bring someone on the stage, and usually they're complaining about something, or they turn to blaming. And I'd say, you better stop right now, because I'm going to strip you naked before this is over. Make sure you want that. I'm good for it. And by the way, I'm doing this to a translator. And when I hear them blaming, I would keep digging. I sort of call it looking to pull that tooth. Sometimes it might take me 20 minutes because we got a language barrier in there. Plus, I'm trying to keep, usually the last thing I do in a workshop, I'm tired of trying to keep my mind straight and remember everything that's happening, even though it's got a translation lag. And every time I found their role. And I said, how do you feel now? They said, I'm feeling embarrassed. So this is powerful. It's always there. Clear accountability, another choice to be accountable. One of the things I really like about my builder is that he does this. He's got a couple of things he's screwed up. We ended up pouring the garage floor 4 times. The second time was his mistake. And instead of blaming somebody, he said, look, I screwed it up. It's my fault. I'll pay for it. I like that in people. It's just easy to be around people that don't make excuses, just real clean. I screwed it up. Other things like that. He's just been, that's such a wonderful, refreshing thing in people. And again, everything on here is a choice. Okay. Every behavior here, you can choose to do it or not choose to do it. And but after our time together, if you choose to do these things, I'll feel like my time was well spent. And if you don't, then I'll just think, well, hopefully somebody else here learned this. This is, I love this expression from Emerson. What you do speaks so loudly, I can't hear what you say. On your feet, I'm on my feet. On your feet, move those muscles, cleanse that body. Okay. Keep moving if you want. So let's look at the social context fields each behavior creates. Let's go back to expressing authentic appreciation. It's a social context field of mutual respect and open, honest communications. I think these interrelate in such an interesting way. I think in a field of appreciation, it's much easier to address unfortunate realities. These all cross-connect. Addressing shared interests, willing collaboration. You see this more and more in the news as international relations are becoming a bigger issue. Talking about interests, and every international negotiation, I believe, necessarily involves shared interest. That's the key to it. Finding those and bringing your attention. Appropriate inclusion. Well, you get an energizing environment, people feel good, and you avoid the anger of exclusion. People will act out exclusion in angry ways. This is interesting. This failing to do this behavior is perilous to you and other people's health. Rigorously keeping agreements. High efficiency. Why? Because if you know someone's going to do what they said, you don't have to worry about it. And trust. How important is trustworthiness? I think it's the single most important thing maybe in your whole life is being trustworthy in every relationship. Addressing unfortunate realities, you can respond to what's happening to reality. Anything else is just nonsense. 100% committed. I sort of tried to make this fun. The difficult we do immediately, the impossible takes a little longer. An expression one of my friends in high school and I used to say to each other. No tolerance for drama. Energy collectively directed to what has to be done. So the issue with drama, to me, the biggest issue is it misdirects your energy. Instead of putting energy to what has to be done, it's another case where you put it into nonsense. And choosing to be accountable, Well, focusing on the results you're accountable to produce. And I think so few businesses actually do this, that focus on everything but results. When I had dysfunctional teams, what I encouraged them to do is everybody to put a sign on their door that says, these are the results I'm accountable to produce. If you get clear about that, it just washes a whole bunch of nonsense away. So there's the social context that I think are generated. Would you want to live in these? The way you do it is you behave accordingly. You can control this. Let me say it differently. You can control as much of it as is controllable. And what matters is how you do these things. Thoughts or comments?
The question I have is like, so you've got an organization that's not effective at focusing on results or outcomes. Can you start or by focusing on that quadrant, or is it better if you go back to kind of, because we learned this as a pyramid. Is it almost best to just go, well, how would you address that?
I think to me, the way to approach this has always been with the online tools. Unfortunately, I don't support those anymore. And you know the story there. My friend Galina put the whole system up in Russia, then the Ukraine invasion happened. And there are people who have these. I think the simple question to take people into this whole world is, would you like to benchmark your team against other peer teams? And then they do the tool. Then you take a look at this RAA behavior, and if it's not clean, that is the evidence you use to say, let's go work on that. And the way you work on it is you have everybody, you give out that RAA worksheet that I can send you guys. It's in the slides, but I can probably got a different copy of it. And bring everybody together and get people stand up and tell the group what they're accountable for. And then you get little working groups to figure out where there's overlaps or where there's omissions. So sort of a half day of work. But I think you got to sort of romance people into this. And I think what I found is the easiest thing for someone. I mean, people are going to be skeptical of this, and rightly so. Nothing else out there works, frankly. Okay. So, and that's not just me saying that. That's people who've done this work with me and are knowledgeable. Frank's son, for example, has got a master's degree in engineering, a law degree. He's in the bar in several states, and a PhD in OD. And he'll say that this is the only thing that works. So people are going to, you start talking about what this is going to do, and people are going to be skeptical, and understandably so. So I think, would you like to benchmark the team and see how we're doing against other business teams? And if they don't want to do that, then there's probably not much you can do about anything, because that's an easy thing. Then you use that to look at a low-ranking behavior and say, why don't we improve this one? One time I was invited to meet with a proposal team at in Denver at Lockheed Martin, which I don't usually work with TRW. And the guy came in and I said, how's it going? He said, well, God, no, we just spent a whole week doing RAAs. And I said, I'm going to leave now. You don't need me. If you got smart enough to do that, most people don't ever do it. And so typical big proposal will have half a dozen business entities in it, or two big ones and some smaller ones. And they never do that. So they're stumbling over each other and arguing about who's this and that, and too much emphasis on who's got what authority. And so I think, Nat, that the way you do this is you take them in with the tool, look at that behavior and say, why don't we, this is a nice hard side behavior. Peter Senge famously said, the soft stuff's the hard stuff. So maybe the soft stuff's hard, but a team that's got more of a technical bent to it, something that's concrete like this in the orange, might be easy for them to want to do. So I think getting in the door with the online tool worked really well for me. That's what I would do. There are people that have the online tool and can sell it to you. I can, if you get interested, you know.
I have those manual ones, so I was
Yeah,
gonna start
think
with
they're
that.
I think they're not bad, and I'll help you with
Yeah.
it, okay?
Yeah, thank you. Well, we'll see if people are open to it.
That's right, yeah. I mean, if they don't want to do it, then, you know, it's kind of like, if the team leader is not interested in this work, they're not interested in finding out how to improve their team using these kind of ideas, then you waste your time to mess with it. Because it's back, I had a really interesting experience. I was working with a contractor team that was really broken, working with them over about 6 or 8 months. And the data, they're getting slowly getting better and better, and everything's improving. Then suddenly the data started going back downhill. And I thought, what is this? Well, they got a new leader. This is a bunch of crap NASA wants us to do. So it's like push-ups. Let's do the push-ups for NASA. Once he said that, the whole thing just lost all its steam. So the team leader doesn't want to improve, then there's no point. You know, it's kind of like, you know, if a student chooses not to learn, there's nothing you can do about it. That's my thought in that. And I'm happy to make a presentation on Zoom or something for your guys if you want. But it would be something like this. This was intended to be a 1-hour thing because it's got like 60 slides in it, but it's taking longer, and that's fine. This is Nico, Larissa, any thoughts about this?
I'm totally on the same page with you, just reaffirming everything that I've known so far and that everything that I experienced so far. By the way, I didn't want to interrupt your discussion, and I put a lot of thoughts on the comments that how you responded to Nico's comments. I lived in different cultures. I've just been very privileged to live in different parts of the world. And I realized that what I do consistently, I bring my green collar everywhere I go. So, and really, it works in any culture, to be honest with you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's I'm on the same. I tend to think about the cultural differences as well. Of course, I respect and understand
Yeah.
that, but I totally see your argument on that. So again, I didn't change a thing in my behavior moving
Yeah.
from one culture to another. So
Yeah.
my green approach works everywhere.
That's right. That's all I'm trying to say. Yeah, thank
Yep.
you, Melissa. That's the point, you know.
Yeah,
And
that's all from me.
and don't run storylines that make it easy for you to dodge that. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah, I agree.
Storylines are a choice, and I have to say I got to laugh with that German, because when he stood there and realized what he was doing, he went like, OMG. We don't do this in Germany, just so you know. By the way, your talk was wonderful. And thank you for coming. We really appreciate you. But we don't do this in Germany.
Yeah. To be honest with you, sometimes it's my sort of secret weapon, if you will. So when people think that they are not cultural, there is no cultural predisposition for that, and I know they are mistaken. So, but basically, being green in one culture brings as much great results as in another culture, and it can't be surprising as to your colleague in Germany who says we don't do that in Germany. Yeah, so
I think there's actually much more difference group to group than there is nation to nation. That's my point. And I think naming it as a national issue is a way of alleviating your need to work with it. That's how I see it.
yeah, I guess you're absolutely right. It's a basic need. It's just
Yep.
really basic to the core of basics.
I think it is.
Yeah.
Okay. the AMBR process, I love this. Attention, that's really what I'm talking about, is how you focus your attention. Storylines are a prime way you do this. And attention is a limited resource. I say you should manage it the same way you manage your currency. Deploy it usefully. There's only so much. I really noticed this, maybe because I'm getting older when I drive, that I've got to really manage where I pay my attention. And if some guy's right on my bumper and behind me, ignore that and keep looking straight ahead. Let my attention on what I've got to be responsible for, not running into anything. So focusing this alters perception to see solutions. So if you run a storyline that a green storyline to focus you, you will see the way forward. I believe that. Mindsets, again, this is really crucial. And I don't know anybody else that addresses these or explains how to manage them. It's back to the green storylines and energizing emotions. Behavior, in the end, this is what really matters. And pay attention to what you do, how you do it every day. And finally, this will bring results. And what I like about this is the good result will subtly help you do this over and over. So a dilemma comes, where are you putting your attention? What mindsets are you running? Are you running green storylines that enable right action, or red storylines that limit right action? Do it, and then watch what happens. It works. The context shifting worksheet. Again, it's an AMBR process. I don't think I really thought about this much till one of you asked me recently, but it's taking attention off of your dilemmas and onto the outcomes you want. So rather than obsess about what you think is a cultural story about something, instead put your attention to what outcome do you want. Shift your mindset, make sure you're running green storylines. Behave yourself. We must be the change we want to see in the world. And finally, the good results you'll get. So it works. Comments, thoughts?
Does work, Charlie, yes.
Yeah,
Go-
and kind of layering those together has really helped me to progress.
Good. So here it is in detail. What's the troubling situation? This is the hardest part of the whole thing, to get this succinctly stated. Believe it or not, that's where people struggle. I do this in workshops with nominal group technique methodology, putting these on flip charts, combining similar items. It's the same thing I used to do with Post-its, Nat. And then having people vote on them, and we pick one that the group can do. Usually it's again, with a team-centric workshop, it's very specific to the team. And this was a request I got early on that said, we don't want a generic thing. We want to do a workshop that's unique to us. And I was thinking, how can I do that? Then I realized I just embed this thing in the middle of the workshop. And when I went to the Publix in China, the thing that I found had really nice balance of energy and everything was, I can't communicate with or motivate children. And it's their own children or other children. So almost everybody has children in their life somewhere. If they don't have their own children, they've got nephews or whatever. So that had most interesting conversations out of it. And then outcomes, and what's interesting about this is people usually don't cast the net broadly enough. They don't think big enough. With my proposal team example, the outcome they wanted was a win. And I said, so I want you to see how differently you approach the problem. If what you want is only to win versus wanting to win, have a good contract, have work-life balance, have a satisfying relationship with your customer, to have good engineering work to do. When you expand your thought process and now bring your attention to all the things you want, it sets out a different course for you. Make sense?
It does. And I don't know how to do it, Charlie, but I think if the text in that social context management, not the diagram, but the list, if that would be readable, it might be more useful for those who are listening this presentation. Do you know what I mean? The text in that social context management and the wide encryption is just very small. So people need to be really able to read that. Just my take.
In the size of the worksheet,
Yeah.
you can actually put a lot of words in there, handwritten. I think running out of space is probably an issue.
He did mention this.
But are you saying on this slide, Larissa, that maybe
Yeah,
make
yeah,
the
on this
visual
slide.
bigger?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely. You got it.
So the way I like to do this, or would do it with you, or you ask you to do it, is first brainstorm the list, in the workshops. There'll be something like, I want my kid to obey. And I said, is that really the end state you want? And I'll say, don't you want them to have a successful life? Oh yeah, I want that. So you can do it with another person, and the list can be like 3 flip charts worth. And then I say, write on the worksheet the ones you're really committed to having. So you want to condense it down. You want to look at you can't focus your attention on 20 items, but you might be able to think of 20 aspects of your child or your situation, and sit down and think hard about, maybe you rank them yourself in rank order do your own nominal group, one person nominal group technique, write down all the things. And I think doing it with another person can be really helpful, someone else to probe your mind. So in the workshops, that they will often leave out things like child to feel loved, things like that that they're busy focusing on school performance typically in China, not loving children. And so provocative comments. And then the list is like, again, 3 flip charts long, maybe 20 items on it. I say scan that and think about the top 3 for you, what really matters, and write those 3. So that's how I would do this. You can't, if it's 20 things, you can't put your mind on it. But for me, sort of 2 or 3 is it. That's all I can think about in my brain at once. Probably the truth is only 1, but I like to think I can think about 2 or 3.
One comment
Yes.
is that I said this the last time when we had a look at this contacts sheet, and the thought that was crossing my mind is, if Larisa and Nat and even Tanya are willing, then the 3 of us can do mine, and we can do yours as well, like a separate session without the guru, without Charlie. So
I think you can do this yourselves. I mean, I'd
No.
go further than that. I think it would be a good learning experience for you to do it with each other. I started.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
I started this whole thing with the one we're all going to do together, and it kind of fell apart. And I think it fell apart because there wasn't enough energy in it. But pick something that matters to you. Situation you would like to shift. Larissa, you could pick world peace.
Yeah. Yeah. My goodness. Yeah. And we tell that
Free. I think if you do this work, you're going to learn more doing Nico's or someone else's work with him than you are doing your own.
Yeah.
Or
sit
down with Tanya.
The power of questioning.
Nat, or sit down with your girlfriend and do it. If you teach this to your new girlfriend and go through something with her, you'll learn it. When I was in school and I had jobs as a teaching assistant, man, I really learned the material in a way I never did when I was studying as a student. Because to explain it to someone else, you got to really dig in. And I don't know, does this seem straightforward to you? Situation, outcome? Then you look at the red storylines that are limiting you and swap them out for the green storylines that take you forward. And then the 8 behaviors, what you can do in each. And finally, a summary of actions you're going to take. And this is, by the way, there are things that this is not useful for particularly. I don't think this is a decision-making tool particularly. I think for that, the better way to do it is this thing, just go into the criteria that are underlie the decision and argue about that and figure that out, and the decision will be easy. That's why building the house was easy. I had the requirements set the criteria. So every time something came up, the question was, did it improve climate change? Did it improve energy resilience? Did it improve the feeling of being in the house? Did it improve safety, personal safety? And so you look at those criteria, and we never had a decision that took us more than a few minutes to do. And other people wring their hands for hours over this stuff. So, and the Chinese used to have me like riding in a car with them, do something in real time. And if it was one example I remember particularly, they were trying to decide whether to set up a satellite operation in Xi'an with a Beijing-based company. So we started into this. I said, let's go ahead and start into it. And I said, I don't think this is the right way to do that. But what I tell you, what this can do is, how do you, if you do set this up, how do you make it successful? That it can do. So it's not an end-all thing, but it's a powerful way just to see something differently. And doing this in workshops with work teams, they always came up with a whole different perspective on the problem. It's about how you see things, you know? So it's this context shifting. So I'd say sit down with, you know, maybe you got some problems with one of your grandchildren, sit down with Alexander and go through this worksheet with him and see what you learn. It's really psychotherapy without a license.
Yeah, that's right.
When people ask me what I do for a living, I say I practice psychotherapy without a license.
It's legal in many states, just so you know. Colorado is one of those. You just have to register.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, you don't have to have a degree.
Interesting.
Yeah, just take note. I'm an astrophysicist without a license.
That's right. So this is data that's been buried in the book, and a kind of a small thing in the book. It occurred to me when I was starting to work with this business in Boulder Lasp, and they're talking about their big issue is that they've expanded so rapidly that they have lost their sense of who they are. And so I started thinking about how to do, this is the only data I've ever known how to do a change a whole institution and measure that you've done it. And in 2008, we had been in a NASA contract for 8 years, a very big contract. And we had a lot of teams that had done multiple TDAs. And one of my guys noticed that the scores were trending upward in teams for the first time we did it. That's a very peculiar result. So the first thought was, we're changing the whole agency, but correlation is not causality. So, and NASA's getting worse. So I knew we had engaged about 10% of NASA's workforce in these team workshops. And were we in fact changing the social context feel of the whole agency? So how to test that? Well, I had one field center because the local rep was their most respected project manager. And I looked at that, and we'd done twice as much work there. So I separated those data and graphed them separately from the prior graph. This is the least squares fit to the prior graph. And sure enough, the slope was twice. That was persuasive enough for me. So you could change a whole company with this. You could change a whole, you know, in principle, a whole country. So I don't know anybody else that has these kinds of data. So how would you do it? Well, I think you'd have to have executive leaders that model these behaviors. And there are those people out there. use the full suite of processes with a pilot team or a few pilot teams. And that's how I broke into companies. Then you roll this out company wide. Everybody gets a copy of the book. It's not about the royalties. I don't make enough money on the royalties to matter. Don't care about it. And then agree to do this repetition. You've got to get this drumbeat of change, and someone, a czar, I call it, someone hopefully in the management who can remind people. Then I'd do a 4D workshop probably, and if it was 800-person organization, you could do workshops with hundreds of people, or you could just do modules. They're much easier. And again, back to where we started, it's unfortunate the sociological exploration is the correct one. It's these invisible forces in remedy. So there's about 10 more slides, I think. I'm going to stop here. It's 9:58. For any closeout comments or questions from everybody? Was this a good session? Useful?
This was a good session. Yeah, I've got some. I think as you noted, some of the improvements we've seen is when the class has been able to engage with the material and kind of provide you some stuff back. And I am working on some additional kind of learnings and some additional gaps that I'm hoping you can kind of help me fill in. So yeah, this was very helpful.
Yeah, very helpful. Very good session, Charlie. Thank you.
Thank you. Nico, comments?
No, thank you. No, always good. This is not the first time. I remember Diane Vaughan's name now, like my mother's name. But yeah, it's always good. It's always good, and I've experienced some kind of an awareness, and I've said that in the past. Huge challenges. So this is creating awareness. Thank you.
Good. Thank you all. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it.
Keep well.
Much
Bye.
Thank
appreciated,
you.
guys.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye-bye.